think everybody is here. Where is that? Oh, yeah. Is Kevin Marshall here? And everything? Yeah, okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay, I'd like to call the Planning and Works meeting to order, please. Okay, thank you. Any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, we are going to flip the agenda at this moment. We're going to actually do the TravelWise motion to reconvene an open session. Councillor Fox and Chair Redmond, all in favor. We're going to start with the TravelWise presentation. So, Mr. Zinck.
Who leads our TravelWise program for the region. TravelWise program recently won an international award for the Association of Commuter Transportation, which was presented in New York City for the Outstanding Transportation Management Association. So I'd like to invite Kevan to come forward and receive the award.
Okay. Am I supposed to be there? Where's your tie? Where's your tie? That doesn't have a tie. Well, TravelWise is a great program, and it's really great to see it growing in terms of the number of employers that are subscribing to the program, and of course all the numbers of employees then that are subscribing to the program. I have my TravelWise bell on my bicycle, as well as the front and back lights are TravelWise paraphernalia. So it's a great program, and it's something that really is, now with ION, of course, really there's a lot of incentive for employers and employees in the community to get on board TravelWise. So thanks very much, Kevin, for all you do in regards to TravelWise. Okay, so back to the main agenda then. We will start with the delegations, and the first delegation has canceled. Kendra Ross is canceled. So we'll go to Jordan Menard. Jordan, here's a regular ION rider. I see him there all the time.
And I wish I was here on something positive.
Well.
So there is some issues with the bus bridging. I was on a train on the 30th of August. I had to disembark at Mill Station and wait for a bus bridge. And wait. And wait. As 3 more trains arrived from Fairway Station, disembarked their passengers, and they all had to wait. It took about half an hour for the bus bridge to arrive, and when it did, it was cramped. There was literally no room left on the bus. And had we only waited about 10 more minutes, we would have been able to catch a train to get to where we needed to go. So I believe that, we need to have a look at how we can improve how the bus bridge works in ion service disruptions, because it's not, especially now in the fall period, where ridership has gone up a significant amount. That's it.
Now, have you had discussions with the staff in regards to what happened that day and what has taken place since, Jordan?
No.
Okay. Mr. Schmidt?
So thank you for coming in your comments. And obviously, we're starting up the system and still have some items that we need to perfect. The bus bridging is pretty difficult for us. We do have 12 specific bus bridging plans that our operator, GrandLink, has the ability to choose from, and we have all the advertisement and everything in place to push any of those out. On that particular day, unfortunately, a non-conventional, not one of those 12 plans was picked, which slowed down how quickly we were able to get that bus bridge in place. The other piece of it is that it takes a period of time for us to ramp that bus bridge up. It is not that we have buses sitting there, operators sitting there. It takes a period of time to get it started. It takes a period of time to decide, is this outage going to be a half hour? Is it going to be an hour? Is it going to be 2 hours? And the response is different. I think in your circumstance, it sounds like you got caught in an outage that was actually fairly short, and maybe we shouldn't have put the bus bridge in at all. But
Yeah.
what I can assure you is that we are working with GrandLink and Keolis to improve on putting those bus bridges in place and providing the service. And if there's any other feedback that you have, you could either send it to me directly if you'd like, or to Mr. Zinck, who's the director of Grand River Transit, and we'd be happy to talk to you and work with you on any of the concerns you have.
I think in this particular instance, it probably would have made sense to have a single train as a bidirectional shuttle on the southbound track.
It's actually difficult for us to do that, both for safety reasons.
Yeah.
We don't really want to have trains going the wrong way on a piece of track. And it's also limited, and I don't know the specifics of exactly where this is. We only have crossover points in a few locations along the track. But we do look at all different ways that we can try and maintain service, recognizing obviously people rely on this to get to work, to get to appointments, to basically to live their daily lives. So it's important for us to have it in place.
Yeah, all right.
Okay. Thanks, Jordan. Okay, so the next item we're going to do is the low-income transit program. We have a staff presentation, then we have a couple of delegations in regards to that. No, I'm not doing it. So if Chris could do the staff presentation, and then we'll take the delegations related to this matter.
Good afternoon.
Yep.
Good afternoon, Chair Galloway and members of the Planning and Works Committee. My name is Chris McAvoy, and I'm a staff member working in Community Services. We are pleased to be here this afternoon to present to you a recommendation for a new, consolidated, low-income transit program. We thought we'd begin with a short history of transit programs and fare products for people living with low income in Waterloo Region. In 2002, Waterloo Region was the first jurisdiction in Canada to implement a subsidized transit pass for people living with low income. In 2004, an evaluation of the TRIP program was conducted. This evaluation found that customers were very appreciative of the program. However, it was not accessible to everybody living with low income, and the price of subsidized passes were unaffordable for some customers. In 2011, a budget issue paper recommended increasing the trip budget in order to give more community members access to a subsidized pass. In 2015, Council asked staff to conduct a review of low-income transit fares and programs and develop options for the future of low-income transit in Waterloo Region. In 2016, the region of Waterloo received a provincial grant to study the impacts of subsidized transit for people living with low income. This low-income fare product study was undertaken in 2017 and 2018 in order to understand the impact of low-income transit and inform recommendations to Council on the future of low-income transit programs in Waterloo Region. Findings from the research study were presented to the Planning and Works Committee in May of 2019. We want to quickly highlight the study's recommendations and the goals of the low-income transit fare review in order to provide you some context for the recommendation that we're presenting to you today. The research study concluded that transit products for low-income customers should be reduced or subsidized by an average of 48%, that discounted products should cost as little as $20, and that low-income transit fare programs continue to work with and involve community organizations. The goals of the low-income transit program review were to maximize provincial and external funding, make low-income transit fare products and programs easier to administer, and make it easier and less confusing for community members. There are currently 4 subsidized transit programs and fare products for people living with low income, in addition to concession fare products for other customers. There's the TRIP program, which offers a 50% discount on a monthly pass, and this is administered in partnership with Lutherwood and the Working Centre. Approximately 1,300 people have access to a pass through this program. There's also the TAP program, which provides subsidized monthly passes paid for through Ontario Works funding. Not all Ontario Works clients have access or are eligible for these passes, and there are approximately 1,000 of these passes distributed every month. There are also discounted 2-ride passes for community members to visit or get home from community organizations, and community organizations purchase these passes from GRT. There are also 2-ride passes available for Ontario Works clients to meet with their Ontario Works caseworker. Finally, there are concession fare products for seniors, adult students learning English as a second language, and high school students. These concession fare products are not means or income tested. Based on the results from the study and an environmental scan of public transit providers in Canada, staff have developed 3 fare structure options. Option 1 would see the replacement of all reduced and concession fare products with a new low-income transit program. This includes the current TRIP and TAP programs, as well as concession fares for students, seniors, and adult ESL students. All discounted products would be based on household income. The levy impact for this option is estimated to be $681,000. Option 2 sees the replacement of all existing low-income transit fare programs with a new low-income transit program. The other concession products for students, seniors, and adult ESL students would be maintained. The levy impact for this option is estimated to be $1,025,000. The third option is to continue with current programs and fare products for people living with low income and continue with the concession products. Within this option, the number of people with access to a discounted or subsidized transit pass would not change. There would also be no impact to the regional levy. Through this review, staff analyzed all the available information to find a balance between increasing the availability of subsidized products while maintaining the net regional levy, which was one of the goals of the transit review. Staff are recommending option 1 be endorsed, as it provides the best balance, as it increases the availability of subsidized fare products for people living with low income and those most in need in our community, while minimizing the increase to property taxes when compared with option 2. Within the low-income transit program, customers would be able to apply online. The program would use the market basket measure as to determine eligibility. And if approved for the program, the individual or family would receive a discount off a monthly pass or stored value. So low-income transit customers who opt for purchasing stored value could load as little as $10 on their EasyGo fare card and receive a 48% discount on their per-ride travel cost. If endorsed, the low-income transit program would achieve the study recommendations and the goals of the review. Notably, the monthly passes and stored value would be reduced by 48%. Through introducing a discount on stored value, customers, again, could access discounted transit for as little as $10. Ontario Works customers would be assessed for Ontario Works transportation funds or supports before being admitted to the program. Community agencies could support customers and applicants with eligibility documentation, as well as completing the online application. And the online application would be available to anyone in the community, providing a single point of access for all low-income customers. Staff are recommending that the low-income transit program be phased in over 2020 and 2021. The dates you see in the report and in this presentation are proposed dates and may shift within the implementation period. The first phase would see existing customers brought into the new program in early 2020. Staff are proposing that individuals and families who are living with low income, who currently do not have access to subsidized transit product or pass, be invited to apply for the program through several phases in 2020 and 2021. The first groups to get access would be those who are already on the TRIP waitlist, as well as individuals and households on Ontario Works who are in the greatest financial need. Next, community members who are in receipt of Ontario Disability Support Program would be invited to apply. Finally, households who are not in receipt of Ontario Works or ODSP would be invited to apply. This phased-in approach would allow time for staff to evaluate and modify the application process and validate estimates, such as the number of customers, as well as the percentage of applicants who are transitioning from full-price products and those who are new customers. These estimates are directly tied to the projected costs or impact on annual transit revenue. That concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris. I'd like to go to the delegations now, if I could, and then subsequent to that, we can come back and have any questions to staff, and of course, questions to the delegations as well. So the first delegation on this matter is Benoit Bourgault from the Student Transportation Services of Waterloo Region. Welcome, Mr. Bourgault.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the time to present. We appreciate that. Today, I represent both the Waterloo Region District School Board and the Waterloo Catholic District School Board, but I also need to advocate for all students because the fare change certainly has impact on all students. First, I need to applaud the region for wanting to support the less fortunate in our society. We need to make the system inclusive for all, so that kudos for that. However, the plan has some cause us to have some deep concern as the fare cost change. First and foremost, from a school board's perspective, as the price continues to go up, because we're limited in funds that we have available for transportation, we have to look at alternatives. It's going to continue to put pressure on reducing the number of students that are riding GRT, which is not a good option at the end of the day. Your product becomes more expensive than other alternatives, so we have to look and consider those. But the question I have really is about other discounts that are still in the system. How can you justify providing discounts to college and university and not to high school students? That's the very first question. Second, TravelWise, great program, great system, you win awards for that. But at the end of the day, TravelWise subsidize local taxpayers that are employees of companies that are for-profit. A lot of them are in the high-tech with good-paying jobs. The participant would be paying significantly less than a student who is in a family situation that may not be very fortunate. That's really a concern. With the increase as well, we're going to see a drop in ridership, which is certainly not the goal of the transit. An unintended consequence that we're going to see is certainly an increase in traffic. And the increase in traffic will be at two locations that are already affected by the LRT, KCI and Eastwood Collegiate. Both have a lot of programs that attract people from across the region. With the cost of transit near the $100, parents will choose to drive and not buy. We all know that there are psychological barriers, psychological price point that cause people to change their behavior. With $100 for the pass for a student, that is significant. We hear often that families already have difficulty buying passes, and I'm talking for students that are near the school but outside of the walking distance at around the 3 kilometers mark. Another $20 or so per month if you have more than one child. That is considerable. The low-income threshold appears to be extremely low. I'm not sure I understand the full program, how it's going to work, but certainly that low income seems to be very, very low. At the end of the day, from a student perspective, we don't think this is a good plan. It does not increase ridership, which should be the goal of the transit system. And really, we're moving the subsidies from student and seniors, which are two groups that we should encourage in taking transit. If we get the students, young adult early into riding the transit, they're more likely to continue using it. From an equity perspective, how can we subsidize private company for profit at the detriment of school boards and students? That's really a question that I have. That being said, I think there's some other alternative that should be considered that would promote the increase in ridership as opposed to reduction in ridership. Thank you.
Okay, any questions to Mr. Bourgault? Councillor Jaworski?
Thank you, through the chair. Just from student transportation services perspective, do you, I'm not sure how the passes work, do you procure them on behalf of the students, or are you speaking on behalf of the parents who will then buy them? Maybe give us some color on that.
So we provide passes to about 400 students that are attending English as second language or other designated program. And students buy their own pass when they attend magnet programs, whether it's the art program, whether it's the International Baccalaureate or other programs like that. So that's the parents that would buy those.
Okay. And then I have a question of staff that's related to this.
Okay, Chair Redmond.
Just a small point, but the university students pay through their student fees for the passes that they get. The entire student body pays for it irrespective of whether or not they use the buses or the transit system.
So, Mr. Bourgault, you understand that? Because you made a statement.
Well,
that
I'm not sure exactly how it works. I've heard from staff that it clogs the bus as opposed to increased ridership and a very short distance around the university, but again, that's besides the point.
Councillor Erb.
Just for clarification, the 400 that you just referred to, what group is that?
A lot of them are English as second language at different levels, and there's other small catchment or student in fast forward. So student with learning disabilities that are not in a regular catchment. So some programs have larger catchment that we can't collect them with yellow school bus. We provide them with a GRT. And in some case, it's also a learning piece to help them graduate into the society, whereas a yellow school bus is at the corner, you don't have to worry, they're picking you up, bringing you to your destination, whereas GRT, you have to navigate your own route.
And you would be doing that more as an enhancement for them to get into the system as opposed to a financial constraint for them? A financial hardship?
No, today we provide them translation the same way as we provide them yellow school bus. It's just because of density and efficiency in our system that we don't have room for them within our system because they are scattered in a much greater area as opposed to a yellow school bus that has a smaller catchment to bring students to school.
just to staff now.
Okay. Mr. Bourgault, I have a question as well. Have you ever considered reestablishing a relationship with Grand River Transit in terms of carrying students such as we did a number of years ago, and then through that process negotiate obviously a different rate than what the average person would be paying, because a number of years ago, of course, we carried a lot of students, and with very little notification, that was pulled from our ridership, and we lost a lot of revenue at that time. So are you considering whether or not we could re-engage in such an arrangement?
I would like to set the record straight. Ample notification was provided, negotiations were in place, negotiation went nowhere, and we had to address constraint and financial constraint, which caused us to find an alternative solution.
And I appreciate the financial constraint, and we have those as well, that we have to consider in terms of running the Grand River Transit Authority. Okay, thank you, Mr. Bourgault. I have no further questions. The next delegation...
Can I have for staff on this one?
On this one? Okay, yeah. Yes, okay.
But no, not for the delegate. So to Mr. Zinck, was very happily giving me information for over the past 72 hours continuously on this, and thank you for that. One of the things I saw in some numbers that we traded is the fact that currently students pay $75, the general person pays $90, $15 increment, yet the low-income one would drop to, as I see here, about $47 for low-income students. How do students qualify as low-income? I know how an individual would, but do we look at the student's own income? Do we look at household income? What would be a low-income student?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So to answer your question, they would qualify through means assessment for the family, for the household, based on the chart that you see in the report indicating the number of members of the household. So, 4 members of the household and the low-income measure that's there, if you're below that, you'd have access to those products for anyone in that household.
So for a low-income household, their costs would go down substantially, I would see, in terms of their transit costs? Because today their only option, correct me if I'm wrong, today is their only option for a student to buy a $75 pass?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next delegation is David Marskell. David, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to see everybody. I had been speaking with Peter, and I appreciate his back and forth with me, but I hadn't realized this committee was meeting, so I wanted to bring it to your attention. It's something that we hope you will consider, and that's free transportation for curriculum-based field trips for teachers, students, and their chaperones, off-peak times, not during rush hour, a layover time when they're at the gallery, museum, wherever for at least 2.5 hours, because that's how long some of these programs take. In advance, teachers would apply online in advance and perhaps have a maximum number per year. We do a similar program with libraries. In July, we had 800 people from all the libraries across the region come to the museum at no cost, but it's something that we think is very, very important for us to do in terms of accessibility. I hadn't realized that this was already happening in other places. Barrie has just completed a pilot project with some positive results. Again, I didn't realize this committee was happening. We're to meet by telephone with Brent just to better understand some of the outcomes from their pilot project. It's also already happening in other cities across Canada where students and teachers and chaperones, they have different variations of it, but it's already happening. This is a note from the Kingston Week Standard from a teacher, just how grateful she is and for a variety of reasons. I think you have the hard copy in front of you, so I won't take more time. I did just receive an email. I've been in conversation with the school boards, and the Director of Education, Loretta Naughton, from the Waterloo Catholic District School Board, wrote to me to say, it's definitely a win-win-win proposal for all the reasons I've outlined. It is the right thing to do, forward-thinking, future-focused, supports an equity agenda, and it's student-centered. I believe there are a lot of benefits to this program with little negative impact to revenues. Schools, very few of them take transportation now. They have to, most of them rely on the yellow school buses. For smaller groups, that's very, very expensive. It's expensive generally for a number of schools. There's an array of benefits that you can see. You've got them in front of you. And I just hope that you will consider this as you go forward as a positive step for a smart community. And I'll answer any questions if you have them.
Okay, thanks, David. Councillor Foxton.
Thank you. Could somebody please enlighten me, because I know North Dumfries Township doesn't have buses taking them to anywhere. They don't take them to the museum. So it's not region-wide, right? Are you talking the 3 cities?
What's that? I'm sorry, I didn't quite get that.
Well, you were talking about buses coming from the cities into the museum, correct?
2 points there. I'm not advocating for the museum. I'm talking about the broader arts and cultural sector for curriculum-based programs going to the Waterloo Region Museum or KWAG or the Symphony or the museum. So that's one point, and I'm sorry for any confusion there. And I was also requesting of the Grand River Transit Authority that they allow buses in the island that under a program like this that students, teachers, and chaperones would travel for free.
So are you talking 7 municipalities or 3?
Wherever the GRT is.
It's only relate to the GRT. School board would continue to have to provide transportation for anyone not on the GRT.
Thank you.
Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to David. So, interesting concept. Your request is to us look at a pilot program. What's your vision of a pilot program? Have you done any research on that, or what do you think needs to be done to test the system?
We had a brief telephone conversation with the gentleman in Barrie. Their pilot project went from December, basically 6 months, from December until June. That's just ended. We were to have a call with him in the coming weeks once school opened. And perhaps some staff could be on that call or even replace us on that call. We were trying to build this out and try to understand it. Of course, I thought it was my idea, and then I realized it was happening elsewhere.
Well, if you wouldn't have given us all that information, you could have claimed it as your own idea. Thanks,
I do think it's the right thing to do. I don't think it will affect any revenues off, between 9:30 and 2:30 or 3 o'clock, that type of thing. That list that I've given you there, I think there's a lot of compelling reasons to do it. So I just appreciate your consideration as you go through this process.
I think the only downfall would be if it's so successful that we'd have problems with it. Capacity. Thank you.
Okay, David, I don't have any more questions. Thanks very much.
Okay, if I can just say the museum's closed right now. We're turning things over, and we're going to open Afterlife, a seance experience featuring the ghost of Thomas Lacey, Thursday the 19th. And thank you to the sponsorship of Urban Good. Thank you. Bye.
Maybe before we get into general questions, maybe we could ask staff to give some thought to the suggestion that David has brought forward. We can have a discussion on that, how that might look, whether or not it has an impact. It would likely save the school boards money if they didn't have to hire yellow school buses to take them to these various field trips, although I know that's fairly limited. There's only a certain number of those trips that are available to each school or budgeted somehow or another. I think there's some merit to it because off-peak, I know that during the free period for ION, there were a lot of classes that went on the ION in that last week of school when the teachers were looking for stuff to do and get on the bus, get on the ION, and there were a lot of classes that took advantage of it. And so it does promote the whole idea of using transit at an early age as well. So maybe we could ask staff to look at that. Now, going back to the main report, was that, Councillor Jaworski, did you ask your question already that you wanted to ask in that regard?
Thank you to the chair. Really, my question was oriented towards the excess capacity issues, which is ironically what Mr. Marskell had just brought up.
Right.
And I think that that's certainly not in the cards today based on the report that we have.
No.
But I do think that there's opportunities, this is going to run for 18 months for implementation, that there's an opportunity to look at the surplus capacity in our system midday and see how we can better utilize it for the betterment of our community. I was thinking more on the low-income side, but as we've heard here, there's arts and culture, student ideas and that. I don't want to start that conversation today, but I do think that that's an opportunity for the future. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay. All right, so we'll turn our mind to the main report and the recommendation that staff have for us. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to move the recommendation with an amendment when the time is right. Tell me whether the time is right.
Well, let's get the amendment on the floor, and you've already indicated to council what your intentions are, so let's get that on the floor. And
Thank you. So I want to thank staff for the report. I've been waiting for this for a long time, and I think overall it's very good. I do appreciate, as we've heard, that there will be some people who lose a benefit that they've been accustomed to. However, I tend to think that a regional program needs to be either universal or needs-based. And what we've had has been neither of those things. It hasn't been universal because although it's benefited some people, it's been a small subset of the general population. And it hasn't been needs-based because although it's benefited some people living in low income, it has not benefited most people. So I do think that what staff have presented to us is truly a needs-based program. And I think that while that may not be my ideal for public transit, I think that's a good place for us to start in this environment. What I don't support is a proposed phase-in. We have thousands of people in our community that we saw on the list who've been waiting for several years for this, and I do appreciate that there is some financial risk for us, but these people are living in financial difficulties, and I'm really not comfortable saying to them after all this that they need to wait another 15 months or 2 years or more to see the benefit. So the amendment that I would like to move is adding to include the budget impact of fully implementing option 1 effective January 1st, 2020 in the 2020 base operating budget and refer the matter to Budget Committee for approval.
okay, so just to keep this a little cleaner, I'm going to ask for the main motion to be moved, and then you can make your amendment. Chair Redmond and Councillor Strickland are moving the main motion. Okay, so your amendment is to implement option 1, year 1, essentially.
Yes.
And not have the 2-year phase-in as contained in the report.
Right. It's not part of the current recommendation, but it is contained.
Yeah, it's not part of the recommendation, but in the body of the report, option 1 is further defined as a 2-year implementation, I believe. Yeah, I think that's everything. The changes to the seniors,
Yes.
and the offsetting.
Yes. Yeah.
The offsets
recommendation itself, I
the
think,
offsets
is
as
solid.
well as the additional costs associated with that. So just to get that on the table, that's moved by Councillor Clark. Is there a seconder for the amendment? Councillor Armstrong. Okay, staff. Mr. Murray, Mr. Dyer.
Yeah,
I guess you've got
I think we want to
seniority.
make this the same comment, so I'll start. So we're obviously in council's hands on this. I understand the intent of what Councillor Clark's proposing. The one thing to keep in mind is I think 2020 budget approval is currently scheduled for sometime in late January. So the budget wouldn't be approved until late January. So if the intent is to have an early and singular implementation date, then I think January 1st isn't quite the right date. So, whether it's March 1st or April 1st, to give staff some time to do the necessary work, get the, fares program into the system. So we're not trying to change the intent of what you're doing, but just think practically speaking, perhaps an April 1st implementation date would be more practical.
And that's fine with you and Councillor Armstrong? Mr. Dyer, that was your point? Okay. Okay. Councillor Strickland.
Thank you. So, sorry, there's a sidebar going on. So you said March 1st would be more realistic?
April 1st.
April 1st. Okay. And how much would that cost additionally over the $681,000 to implement it in 1 year?
Mr. Dyer, get your mental calculator out.
Well, the 681,000 is the total cost. The table on page 46 of the agenda shows that cost phased in over the 3 years. So if I was doing some approximate arithmetic, I would say it's probably a $400,000 to $450,000 impact in 2020. And the balance would come in just as an annualization, if you would, if you will, in 2021.
Okay. And I'm not clear, where does the $855,000 that we currently spend on subsidized transit fares, where does that fit in? Because option one says replace all existing transit fare programs. So that means the $855 will be replaced by this new program? Or this is in addition to the $855,000?
It's an addition to, so it does not replace. So basically, all the funding in the current programs is being used, and there's an additional $680,000 required to implement this.
So I don't quite understand why we would do that. I thought part of the plan was to minimize impact to the levy. So when I was reading it, I was hoping that that $855,000 would at least be reduced somewhat because we're enhancing this additional program. So you're saying it's $855,000 plus $450,000 if we go with Councillor Clark's recommendation, plus the $1.3 million that we're spending through Employment and Income Support Ontario. So I'm still not 100% clear when I read the report on what the financial implications are.
Yeah, I think you're right, Councillor Strickland. Maybe staff could spend a moment to clarify that.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. So the ask is for $681,000 over and above what the region's commitment is right now to this program. And on top of that is the provincial monies that are there for the TAP program and other requests.
So that $1.3 million is 100% provincial dollars?
Correct, yes.
And we supplement that with $855, and now the request is supplement that with additional $450,000 if we did it in 1 year.
In the first year.
Yes.
In 1 year, okay. So I'm just wondering, maybe we get some clarification in terms of a table or something, just really having a look at what those financial implications are so we can get it in writing.
You're going to have that for Wednesday?
Yeah, for Wednesday.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay, so
Okay.
I could support it. I'm not sure if I could support it all phased in 1 year, given the fact that we're already spending $855,000, so 3 years might be too much. Maybe a compromise would be 2 years.
But just for clarification, for the purpose of this discussion, we'll get the sheet for next Wednesday, but the 855 is in the base? Is in the base?
It's in the base.
Okay, so okay. It's not an additional 855?
No, sorry, it's in the base, but I'm talking
The additional is
total.
the 450 for this year and 230 or whatever for the next year.
Yeah, so then it'll also almost be $3 million, including the 1.3. And I don't have enough information in my memory about how that 1.3 million actually works. So would people accessing that subsidy be able to use that funding to purchase a low-income transit pass?
Well, Mr. Dyer is going to make this perfectly clear now, so.
I don't even know the answer now, but I think this is why we need to have a closer look at this, how they would interact, how they interchange, and what the total financial implications would be. I think it's a fantastic idea. I think it's something we need to do, but I think we just need a little more detail on how that would all fit together, in my view. If I come back Wednesday,
Yep,
that's fine.
Okay, Councillor Jaworski.
Well, as I said before, thank you to Mr. Zinck for all the information over the weekend and the week. But, we covered the veterans. Veterans ride for free today. They'll continue to ride for free tomorrow. That won't be eliminated in this.
Over 65.
What's that? Oh, veterans over 65,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
And
Be clear about that.
Yeah, and if you look at the value for low-income students, their cost for a pass, for a monthly pass, will drop almost 40%. In terms of, single fare ticket fees, today we offer great value at $2.86. That drops to $1.49 for a ride, based on draft numbers. I'm not going to hold Peter to this, but draft numbers. But I think this is really a good value for our community and a more appropriate use of resources and monies.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you. If staff are coming back with more financial information, and I appreciate that, perhaps I can also ask, and maybe it's already in this report and I just don't see it, but I don't think that we've taken into account an increase in ridership that would be, that we would expect would happen with more low-income people now using the service. So if that's in here, can we please pull it out and make it clearer? And if it's not in here, could we please add it? Because I think that I think we can anticipate that more people will use it.
Mr. Zinck?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the report indicates that we see about a number of existing riders, about 75%, will use low-income fares, and another 25% approximately will be new riders. Mm-hmm. So the numbers of that, we haven't said our ridership will increase, but that's how we determined the impact and the users for these low-income fares.
Is that a reasonable thing, though, to bring back if we're trying to look at our budget impact? Is that a reasonable thing for us to include?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is included in the $680,000.
Oh, it is? Okay,
yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Strickland.
And just further to that financial information coming back, if staff could also include what's in the base for our GRT business plan for next year. Well, not what's in the base, but what is anticipated in our master plan for GRT for next year.
Okay. Chair Redmond.
Thank you, Chair Galloway. Just to support the April 1st commencement date, because there will be people who will no longer receive subsidy. So I think it's really important that, and I'm sure GRT staff already turned their mind to how we communicate this, because as much as this is based on principle and it's pan-regional for GRT, and I really do support the rationale that Councillor Clark has referred to. I think it's really important we recognize that there are people in taking advantage of some subsidies that will no longer meet the means test, and we need to prepare them for the fact that their rates will change as well.
Okay, I just wanted to say that I support going forward, support what Councillor Clark is proposing as well. I'm wondering how we will monitor this on an ongoing basis after it's implemented to understand whether or not the assumptions that staff have made in terms of the new riders that this might attract versus riders we might lose, having then, paid higher fares in a couple of circumstances. How will we monitor that? Are we able to monitor that effectively, and when would we learn about that? A year after, 6 months after, April the 1st, to see what the impacts are. My suspicion is that, and I know staff are typically quite conservative in their estimates, as they should be, but that the ridership numbers, the increase in new riders might be actually significantly higher than what's being assumed at this point. And of course, that would be a good thing, both in terms of ridership and in terms of revenue as well. And the cost may not be quite as high as we're going to be budgeting for. So I don't know if staff have given any thought yet to how this can be monitored and reported on.
So I think a useful comment is we do see that over time, the new riders that are, the existing riders that are current transit users, the numbers will decrease, and new riders at the lower fare will increase over time. So it generally have a positive impact. We don't know how to measure or address that at this point. We do, through the survey and the study, know that about 75% of the people interested in the program are current riders, current transit users. So we do know that impact. We don't know how that will change going forward.
Well, maybe I could ask staff to give some thought, in the longer term, not anything now, but in the longer term, how that could be monitored and evaluated. Okay, so we have an amended motion. I'm going to take the motion as amended. All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Okay, well, thanks very much, Chris, and everyone else who was involved in that. It's taken quite some time, quite an extensive project, and I think that really moves us forward in the right direction. Councillor Lawrence.
Well, I would agree wholeheartedly, Mr. Chair, but I'm just wondering if we could ask staff to come back at some point with what a pilot project would look like for students. We haven't dealt with that part, right?
Pilot project for students?
Yes, for the arts. That was suggested by Mr. Marskell.
Well, yeah, no, I did give direction for staff to come back and take a look at that and see what that would look like.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's important. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great possibility there. Okay, thank you very much for that. The next delegation is Isaac Tang. Mr. Tang, regarding the River Road Extension matter. There is a letter from Mr. Tang in your consolidated agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And good afternoon to you, Mr. Chair, and the members of the committee. Thank you for taking the time to read our letter. We were here earlier in June of this year dealing with my client's lands. Just by way of reorientation, my client is H&R REIT. They're the owners of 35 acres of land close to the Fairway LRT station. The lands are bounded by Wilson Avenue to the west, Goodrich Drive to the south, Wabanaki Drive to the east, and the CP rail tracks to the north and the east. So it's a substantial redevelopment parcel. All access points currently, the 4 access points, are from Goodrich Drive. There are no other access points to my client's lands. And so redevelopment of this site would hinge on access to and from Goodrich. In May of this year, the region expropriated lands to the south of my client's property to allow the River Road Extension project, to allow for the widening of the road to 30 meters. And part of this project also proposes a continuous median along Goodrich that would significantly restrict access to the parcels. So back in June, I had provided with my letter what we call a median design alternative that would protect for a full moves access along Chandaria Place by protecting for a future left turn lane from Goodrich Drive into the site. We were advised by that time that the relocation of services, which the region was planning to do this fall, and that our understanding is that that dealt with hydro, KWAI, along Goodrich would not preclude our median design alternative. And we were directed back in June that if it turned out that it did, we could return in the fall for discussion. Well, we were advised on August 20th by staff through the region's consultant that the design we had proposed would in fact conflict with the region's current design plans. Two reasons were provided. One is that by putting a left turn lane in, it would conflict with certain hydro poles that were proposed to be relocated. We weren't told the extent of the poles that would be conflicted, and we had asked for AutoCAD drawings, but I think through a mix-up, different drawings were circulated. In any event, we're not certain which poles are being conflicted or not. And the second reason is that initially we had proposed that the 1.5 meter boulevard for the road would be sufficient to put the hydro poles in. We've seen this in other instances across the region, while we were told in this situation that the boulevard would not be wide enough. So when we heard this news, we were obviously very concerned. We went back to our consultants. We asked them to double check their design and to make sure it worked. We were told that it would in fact work. And so we're here today asking that the region not relocate its services until we've had this meeting between the region's consultants and our consultants to find out what exactly these conflicts are. And if there are conflicts, what solutions are available to allow us to reasonably move forward without, number one, delaying the region's plans. That was never our client's intention in the first place. But number two, ensuring that we're not ripping up the services twice when these lands do redevelop. So I believe the last time I was here, it was Councillor Verbanovich who mentioned that fundamentally for a site of this size, it'd be important to allow access to continue to have functional access and continue onto this new roadway. And that staff should give this appropriate consideration going forward. And from the perspective of my clients, we could not agree more. So I want to make it very clear what we're asking for the region now. We're not asking the region to make a decision as to whether or not it would protect for the left turn access moving in. Now, we understand that that is a subject of pending litigation, and we heard loud and clear from the chair that that would not be deliberated at this point in time. But what we are asking for is that the region, when it's designing and planning for these utilities to be relocated on Goodrich, to plan for the circumstance where this full move access would be required to be protected. The request is for the region to avoid relocating some of those utilities now in an area where redevelopment in the future would require relocation yet again. It really is a circumstance where it's measure twice, cut once. So my letter sets out two solutions that have been vetted by our design consultants that may work. In the letter, I proposed I took this right from the region's guidelines, the cross-section, and we're still a bit perplexed as to why the relocation couldn't comply with exactly what was provided in the staff report when the River Road extension was proposed, and that's why we're asking for the meeting. But the second solution is, if in fact it turns out that the region needs additional land so that the hydro poles could be moved, a meter and a half back, I'm here advising that my client, once we find out what those requirements would be, we're open to entering into a Section 30 agreement with the region so that you can require these additional lands without going through the long expropriation process. Essentially, they would be added to the lands that the region has already acquired from my client, and the fair payment of that at market value will be determined as in the usual course through the expropriations process. So there are real solutions here to protect for this access. There are real solutions to avoid ripping up the hydro poles twice. And so we're just asking the region to consider that. So in summary, our ask is simple and it's twofold. First is that the relocation of services not take place until staff have met with our consultants and explored options as to how this full moves access can be protected at Chandaria Place that will avoid a conflict with this hydro utility relocation. And our second ask is that, and I think it's to respond to some of the comments that I heard last time at the June meeting, that staff report back to the committee on these options before making a decision as to how to proceed with the relocation of services. So subject to any questions or comments, those are our submissions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tang. Mr. Tang, you're putting us, I feel as chair, you're putting us in a bit of a precarious situation because you have commented about pending litigation. You have commented in your letter about significant injurious affection claim, and I'm not sure what you're asking the committee is really something that we would normally deal with in open session when these kinds of legal proceedings are being held over our head. So I'm a little bit concerned how you want us to react, given that there could be other actions being taken, and then possibly things said here today could be used against the region and the taxpayers of the region in some future litigation. So I'm not really sure how we can deal with your request. In any event, even if that were not the case, I would not find it normal for this committee to be dealing with the level of detail that you are asking us to deal with, at least not at this point in time in the process when there's still a fair bit of process to take place. And I mean, I appreciate that your client that you're representing has certain interests, the regions has certain interests, and often these things can be worked out in the course of time, and I would hope that would be the case in this particular situation as well. Did you have any response to that?
To respond to your comments, Mr. Chair, I'm not here to talk about the litigation. I think I want to make sure that was very clear.
You mentioned it, and in your letter you talk about injurious affection claim.
It's in my letter. What I'm here today is to ask for.
You're making it an issue, and I'm telling you that we would not normally deal with litigation or injurious affection type matters in an open session.
And so, to be clear, Mr. Chair, I'm not talking about the injurious affection issue here. I'm asking. Our understanding on the public record is that services are being relocated along Goodrich in the fall, and my client's ask is that in considering the potential relocation of these services, what the region should factor into is the cost of relocating the services again when the land's redeveloped. I think that is what we're asking for, and we're asking that staff have an opportunity to meet with our consultants because they haven't had this meeting yet to talk about the details that very fairly shouldn't be discussed at this committee.
So are you saying staff have refused to meet, or is it to be scheduled yet? Or
I think last time in June when I was here, the understanding of this committee was that there would be no conflict with the design that my client was proposing. On August 20th, we were told that there was a conflict. And so I looked at the next agenda. I wanted to make sure that committee was clear that the information that they had understood was different than what is the case now. And so before moving further with any other steps along the process that might be permanent, we're just asking for the opportunity to meet with staff so that these types of details, if there's an available solution, can be worked out.
Okay, I'm going to ask Mr. Bauer, setting aside any legal implications that I've alluded to, maybe Mr. Bauer could maybe give us a staff perspective on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the first thing I'd like to make clear is that the proposed design or the approved design for River Road includes a center median, a continuous center median, and with contemplated right-in, right-out access on each abutting property, And the full movement access is provided by adjacent roundabouts, in this case at Wilson and at Wabanaki. So we really don't see a need at this point for a left turn lane or a full movement access at that point. And we don't see that need arising imminently in the future. The purpose of the center median is really to provide a safer mechanism for all movement accesses to these properties. And so we feel that's important to keep in mind. That being said, we did take a look at the corridor and the available space and whether a full movement access with a left turn lane could be accommodated within the existing right-of-way. Looking at all of the utilities that are existing there, that we're working around, there's existing water mains, there's existing bell utilities, and existing hydro poles. The bell and the water main underground utilities are not proposed to be relocated, only the hydro poles. And given the location of the other utilities, we have limited space to put the hydro poles, and we can't accommodate a left turn lane within the existing 30-meter right-of-way and keep the hydro poles the desired distance away from the roadway and the proposed multi-use trail. So if at some point in the future a left turn lane were necessary and approved, it would necessitate a relocation of some hydro poles in the future, as well as other work to accommodate that kind of an access. So we don't feel that that's an issue that needs to be addressed or resolved at this point in time. The design is largely complete. The relocation work is ready to commence this fall. I'm not going to comment about the need for additional property at this point, I don't think, unless our solicitor wishes to add anything.
I think she's shaking her head now. Okay. Any questions of Mr. Tang? Okay, thanks, Mr. Tang. There's no questions.
Thank you very much.
Okay, now on to other parts of the agenda. There is one item on the consent agenda. That's the information package for Notre Dame Drive reconstruction in Wilmot. That's the only item under consent. Councillor Nowak, was that you or Carl, whoever? Councillor Lawrence, Councillor Nowak, okay, all in favor? Consent agenda, one item. Under the regular agenda, the first item is a updated memorandum of understanding between the GRCA and the region. Nothing too dramatic there, I don't think. So there is a recommendation to approve that updated. Councillor Nowak, Councillor Jaworski, all in favor? That's carried. The application for zero emission vehicle infrastructure program for some electrical plugins in the townships at the library branches, I think particularly. A good effort, a good initiative under climate action, et cetera. Trying to promote electric vehicles. Councillor Fox is going to move that. This is an application. Oh, a question, okay. I got a number of questions here, sorry. Moving too fast here. Councillor Armstrong, I think all the rural representatives want to speak.
What I had intended to do was comment on the fact that the meeting in St. Agatha was conveniently set so that I'm here at Regional Council and cannot attend it. So I want to thank very much.
Councillor Nowak.
Yeah, fully supportive. I think it's a great idea. I'm just wondering about the mechanics and how these work. You
plugged them in.
I know, but you have to come in. Somebody has to pay for it. Somebody has to pay for it. You come in there with an app on your phone and to connect. How does and then the hydro? Who pays for the hydro?
We do.
So Through you, Chair Galloway, Kate Daly is here. She's been facilitating the project. This has been, I must say that this has been a very interesting endeavor involving partners from across the region, and it's scaled up. The interest in this is very significant. But I would also add that the only way we could actually be eligible for this project if we did it at a regional level with all of the partners putting projects forward. So, Kate, would you respond?
Sorry. In response to the question about charging, it's typical to charge a fee. It's not necessary, but we typically do at the region for the stations we already have. And the common cost for that is about in the $1 to $1.50 range per hour for a level 2 charger. In terms of utility costs, those are typically much more than covered by that rate, and the remainder of that rate would usually help to subsidize the networking costs to keep it connected to the broader system.
So is it an app that you put on your cell phone to connect to the hydro?
Typically, yes. The two options that I think all the partners are considering as part of this are two of the most common types of chargers. And you would typically, if you were an EV owner, be a member of one of those, but you're also eligible to use your account on the other type of station as well. So they'll be very interoperable throughout this particular application, which is great.
Okay, just want some clarity on that. It's a great idea, so.
Councillor Shaw?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, great idea. We're putting some stations in some other places. I just wanted to have some clarity on the position with the St. Jacobs Library. I understand from our staff that the plan is to put it on the on-street parking, and I just want to make sure that's true, because if it's behind the library, no one's ever going to find it.
Yes, that was, I believe, the location we were looking there.
Okay. Okay, moved by Councillor Fox and seconded by Councillor Nowak. Questions on the motion? All in favor? That's carried. Next item is the Elmira Community Circulator Pilot. So there is a recommendation there. Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. I was really happy to see that Grand River Transit recognized the community benefits of the Elmira Community Bus, and I thank staff for supporting the route. I know we asked for to bring this back for an RFP, and you've done that. Just a quick background about Kiwanis Transit. It's a local not-for-profit that provides transportation, currently contracting the mobility route with the region, and it creates really good community. I understand the region of Waterloo has authority to operate a public transit system, but also that the region has authority to allow other organizations, I guess, to run those kinds of things. We've had really good comments from caregivers who have access to the Early On Child and Family Center, to our thrift stores, to grocery stores, to business, and to employers, and just no end of positive comments on the service. It's a free service. It allows Kiwanis Transit is saving approximately $45,000 a year from their work that they do with the mobility service, keeps their costs down. And this is a community-led, it's an innovative solution to a need that was seen by the community, not only by residents and councillors, but also by Kiwanis Transit and other social agencies in the community. It's cost-effective and builds and fosters community. So I think we've talked about being innovative and community builders. One thing that hasn't happened with this route is we haven't sat down and had a really good conversation about what delivery of transit or shuttle services might look within the townships and maybe even within the cities. So what's a shuttle and what's important to have as a full-fledged transit? And so I would I would like to move that the region supports the Kiwanis Transit for at least another year in the shuttle service that they provide around town, and that continue until such time that we are able to have that more in-depth discussion of what this might look like.
Okay, and seconded by Councillor Nowak. Discussion, Councillor Armstrong.
Yes, Chair. Further to what Councillor Shantz was talking about with Kiwanis Transit, yes, it is saving us money, but it's also helping us to improve the customer service that we have, that we've been able to free up more of our buses to be able to make the runs around the 3 townships. Instead of running back and forth across just simply across the town of Elmira, because a lot of the people that use the bus to get to 21 are ones that were using the Kiwanis Transit to get right into the city. So that's one of the reasons why it's helped to save us money and allow us to provide this service. And the other thing we were talking about too is that the choice that we have here is that I think what we're looking at is fair, F-A-R-E, and free. And I think that's one of the questions we have to look at too when we're here talking about this. Thank you.
Okay, I have no further speakers. I support the recommendation as a one-off, and would note, I think as Councillor Shantz has noted, that this does potentially save us $176,000 in our pro forma budget, having spent earlier this afternoon potentially some additional amount of money, a small offset to that. And I do want to also emphasize that this report here today is at the request of council. This was requested of council some time back, and staff have done their due diligence and brought forward the recommendations, and council is making its decision at this time. All in favor? And opposed? That's carried. Okay, the next item is the couple information items, the travel signal corridor signal timing review on page 49. Any questions in regards to that report? Seeing none, the water efficiency master plan update, page 59. Any questions in that regard? Seeing none, any other matters to bring to the attention of the committee? Councillor Foxton.
Thank you. I just wanted to say what an amazing job Northumberland Street was. If a lot of you aren't aware, they took out a part of our road in Northumberland Street around our cenotaph, and then working with the township, they've made this beautiful area, seating area around the cenotaph, raising the cenotaph. It is truly stunning. I have some pictures to show you if you'd like to see it. It's not complete yet because we haven't put in, we've put in in-ground irrigation for the plants and for the pots and the trees that are going to go there. And the plants have not been planted yet, but I'd love to show you because I'm very proud of the work the region did with the townships. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other matters? Motion to adjourn. Councillor Kiefer, Councillor Rentz, all in favor? It's carried. Thank you.